Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart. I'm here with Peter Scalzo, who just got back from Greece, and you had a great vacation, right?
Had a great vacation. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So if you see in the video, these little red-faced, it's,
I had a reaction in the sun.
yeah, it's not because you got sunburned the way you might normally.
Yeah, no, I had a reaction. Yeah.
Well, welcome back. We're going to have a good conversation today.
Yeah.
So we've been in this journal for a while, and we're getting close to the end of it, and we're going to continue for it. But this next section, as I understand it, is about hope.
Yeah, so the context, again, we figured out, just for summary's sake, this is actually my 20th year in the cancer space because I was sick a year before my first surgery. So it's been a long time in this world, in this cancer world. And at the point of this journal, I am recovering from a 10-hour surgery with 3 surgeons, and it represented a change in my cancer journey in that the cancer became metastatic. It was my 14th surgery. And so I was brought an empty journal and was really in the abyss of just hopelessness and all that. And God used me writing in this journal to open me up. And so that I could begin a healing process, recovery process. So I think I'm in the hospital still when I wrote this. And I remember, if you've listened to any of the earlier podcasts, I had already processed a lot of those emotions. Mm-hmm. And I was entering into, what would you call it, Sean? Just a place of recovery where hope was coming back in, I think, where I was looking to God more. And I forget what we called it at the last podcast that we did it, but it was this journey out of the tough place I was in into into a change into more of a hopeful place.
Yeah, I think we call it the outer journey too. It's because when you hit the wall, this major event in your life, you're invited to do an inner journey, and that's where you started examining and expressing who you really were, your real feelings, and we see that in your journal. And the outer journey is as you're starting to surrender and connect with reality. And
I think that's a good way to put it. Connect with reality. Yeah, because there were some things that I said, right, that weren't, I label them as fact or truth.
Yes, that was fascinating. Yes. But now you're in a place where you connect more, not just with the reality of the situation, but I think the reality of who you are is the outer journey, as you start recognizing that who you are and who you're created to be in your inner personality, the things that maybe you've been withholding. Like we see you express at times your anger towards God or your feelings of disappointment, so forth. You're actually expressing the real of what you're really feeling, and God's big enough to take it.
And I think we really talked about, you emphasized that perhaps this is my greatest expression or time of faith, is being completely honest with God through this process. And that perhaps I had not been that way before, which is probably correct. And I finally got completely honest with myself, God, and others, So it was a great time for me. It was a hard time.
Yeah.
Really difficult time, but it was great for me. And so if you're interested in any of the earlier podcasts where we go through that journey, that you can just listen to them. I forget where it starts, where we start to go through this journal. But we've done a number of episodes now on it. So I think I'm in the hospital room still. I was down at Lenox Hill Hospital in Manhattan for like a month, and I believe I'm still down there. I'm in a much better place, even though my prognosis and diagnosis hadn't changed. I had been through this whole going through the wall and processing all of my emotions, who I am, and who is God in my life, all that stuff. And so I remember sitting there and thinking, and it was only God, I think, who put this thought in my mind, but it was something like, hey, there's a verse that says, now abide in faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. And I sort of thought of that as like a three-legged stool. You know, obviously these are very important qualities, faith, hope, and love. And I thought, well, I know something about love because we talk about that a lot in the evangelical space, but it's the 1 Corinthians 13 actually defines what love is, right? Mm-hmm. Love is patient, it's kind, it's all that. And so if you're interested in a definition of love, and God is love, you can look at that chapter and just read about it. And then faith, I thought, well, faith is defined in Scripture too. In Hebrews 11:1, it's defined as the assurance of things hoped for, conviction of things not seen. But there's this, I also said, trust, belief, conviction, dependence. And Scripture says without faith, it's impossible to please God. So I had a little bit of a definition going on for faith and love. And I was like, well, I don't know if I've ever defined hope before. Like, I didn't know what it was. And I don't think I had heard a lot on it. And I'm like, maybe hope is something really important for me right now in this hospital bed. What can hope do for me? And so I just started to explore it a little bit. And I know that verse, it says abound in it. And I was like, I don't think I'm doing that. Abounding in it, dwelling somehow in this place of hope. And then God was described as the God of all hope. I thought that was an interesting phrase. And there's a verse in Romans where it states, hope is only for the unseen things yet to be fulfilled in the future. So hope is an expectation in the promises of God. And so for me, it was like faith provides the assurance because it is complete trust in the one who has made the promise. And that's the foundation for hope. So I thought, I can't really abide in a place of hope unless I have faith in God, because the thing that's going to happen comes from God. And then I wrote down some notes and I picked these up somewhere. So just comment when you
picked
want.
Up these sayings, or
they were like things about hope, and one was faith. It was like a comparison of hope and faith. Hope. Okay. So faith rests in understanding. Hope rests in the will. I don't know if that.
I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
And faith tells us what is to be done, teaches, prescribes, directs. Hope stirs up the mind that it may be strong and courageous. Faith, the object is truth. Hope, the object is the goodness of God. Faith is the beginning of spiritual life before trials. Hope proceeds from trials.
Hope proceeds from trials.
Yeah, I don't know if any of that stirs you.
Well, you've been going through a trial.
Yeah.
And so say the faith one again, just to...
Which one, the last one?
Yeah, right before that. Yeah, faith. Yeah.
Faith is the beginning of spiritual life, even before trials. Hope proceeds from trials.
Hope proceeds from trials. Yes, this is really fascinating. Your perspective right now is that... can I just go backwards in time for a second? And when you think about your hope, what hopes then were you in that moment? Yeah, was telling you what was proceeding from trial. What was the hope that you may have in that moment where you're writing this journal?
I think it was stemming from hope was God must have a plan and a purpose in this. And God was going to do something in me and through me through this trial.
So your hope was that there was something significant value
Yeah.
in this suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair restatement?
Yeah. And
A lot of people would have said something about I hope that I'm healed of this.
yeah.
And that's not what you just said, so that's interesting.
No, yeah. Yeah.
Why wasn't it that he would be healed?
I think that I had resigned myself to the fact that this health issue was going to take my life at some point. I didn't know when.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, yes, God could heal me. That was certainly possible. But I think the hope was more about God bringing purpose to my life in this. I think the worst part was laying there thinking there's no purpose or meaning to this journey. And so hope was like, I think God can do something very special in this journey.
We've had this conversation a few times
Yeah.
in this room as we've been thinking about other people's journey. I think I hear more sadness from you whenever somebody doesn't share their suffering journey in cancer and passes, but under the belief that they're so focused on healing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that you're sharing your hope was actually in purpose more so than healing here. So I find that absolutely fascinating.
I think I've always maintained, because of what it did in my life, that I'm a child and I'm going to ask for healing for anyone, including myself.
Yeah.
But I've always thought of this. I'm going to put healing on a shelf. I've asked for it.
Yeah.
And it's up to God to do it if God wills it. But I've always thought, how does God want to transform me in this journey? To me, that was more important. Yes, a physical healing is wonderful. It's beautiful. And I've experienced healing, but how has my life changed? How has my soul, my spirit changed? How has my perspective changed? To me, transformation is even more of a miracle than a physical healing.
Transformation is.
Mm-hmm.
And you felt the need for transformation.
Yeah, I was like, man, I can't be the same individual prior to this event, going through the wall and then coming out of it and being the same person. I just couldn't.
So your real hope was in transformation.
Yeah.
Like what your heart's desire was to see transformation.
Yes.
That's really fascinating. I had this interesting conversation with a mutual friend, and since I don't have permission, I won't share their name, or I'll leave that a bit anonymous, but it happened in the last couple of days. And he said to me, because he had gone through his own trial, and he's like, Sean, the moments that you really ticked me off the most, and that wasn't even the words he used, were you would say to me, I can't wait to see what God's going to do with this, with what you're going through. And I really thought about it. I was like, I have to think about, hey, my own words, and, it's not words of comfort, I guess, necessarily, because it may tick people off. And you're describing something here. And so I'm kind of looking at this tension as though it's not something you can give away. It's something you had yourself. It's like you wanted to see, you had hope, you had a desire for transformation,
Mm-hmm.
and you recognized that you were in pain. And then you also said, I put healing in a box and set it on the shelf, recognizing that I've asked and that it's out of your control. You're powerless to do anything with that. And your hope wasn't in healing.
Right.
It was in your purpose. And the purpose was more important than the healing. Transformation was more important than the healing. And so you found comfort in that.
Yeah. And I just want to expound a little bit more on hope.
Yeah.
It comes from a Hebrew word that I can't say. It comes from a Greek word that it's even more, I won't try. Just having come from Greece and watching my girlfriend's reaction to me just saying thank you. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the Greek word. But in the original languages, there's no doubt attached to the word. like wishful thinking. Like we use hope as like wishful thinking. Well, I hope I get an ice cream tonight, that kind of thing. But it is it is a confident expectation or assurance based upon a sure foundation for which we wait with joy and full confidence.
So you couldn't have hope in physical healing because
Yes,
you weren't given that assurance.
correct.
Yeah. But you felt like you did have assurance about your purpose.
Correct.
Yeah. Remind me, because
Yeah.
I can think of it, but I'm actually, you were given a word on this even, weren't you?
What, remind me.
Well, I thought that there was a level of, I'm going to use this cancer.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Right. I'm sorry.
God was speaking to you. It's like, I'm going to use this cancer.
Yeah.
And it was going to be something that your ministry, and you were initially angry with God when you started writing this journal, because I think you felt like he hadn't kept his word.
I mean, 2005, it was, obviously it wasn't an audible voice, but in my heart and mind, I heard, I want you to be transparent about this journey. And there was an expectation that God would use it for ministry purposes. And so 10 years later, my 14th surgery, and they're telling me, sorry, 5% chance of survival, we're done here. What do you mean we're done here? I haven't experienced what I thought would be, quote, ministry at all in this journey. So I had that hope, that expectation that God would do something unique and special with it. That was in the crosshairs. Yeah.
So you expressed that early in your journal, your frustration, your disappointment. I don't know what the right words would be with God about, hey, this doesn't seem to reconcile with what I thought you were, where I thought you were leading me. And so now you're at a point in your journal where your hope seems to be tying into something, a truth that you have captured, and it is that you have purpose and meaning, and that that purpose and meaning is bigger than the cancer itself. Is that the way you would describe it? Something like that?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just going to, hope is the desire of something good, or for me, transformation, with a certain expectation of obtaining it. Biblical hope is certainty, not probability. And then hope becomes possible by faith in a living God who can be trusted to keep his promises.
So I guess what's interesting about this is that you're having to wrestle with God about your physical condition conflicting with a hope that you have.
Yeah.
And is that a wrestle that how did that look?
Well, I would describe my person inside as being hopeless at first.
Yeah.
And that's a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
And as I started to journey through the wall, and God was really ministering to me, then again I started to I think that's why I went into this journey of what does hope really mean. And so expecting that God would do something unique and special in me and through me grew. That was starting to grow and become part, so that I think was the hope was, wow, I do have something to live for. I have a lot to live for. And I'm looking forward to what God's going to do, how he's going to use us.
You've defined hope in the biblical terms, and they're more precise in the sense of it's the realities of God but did you carry false hopes too at the time that you actually needed to shed?
Well, I think a false hope would have been God's going to heal me no matter what.
But were there others?
I didn't know that. I don't. I know you're thinking, I mean, I had been so stripped of so much.
Mm-hmm.
I was like a shell. So I'm not sure. What are you thinking right now?
I'm actually just asking if there's some things there that you recognize that you had hope for that didn't come to fruition, and now you can put your finger on that. In other words, how do we hope in an appropriate way is kind of what I'm actually wondering about.
Yeah.
And so you put some definitions out there of
Mm-hmm.
hope being in, things that God says or as, points to you. And so then you pointed to, I'm going to put it somewhat generic but it's important. So I don't mean to take its importance away by talking about generics, but that your life would have meaning and purpose from the backside of that.
Yeah.
And as real as that is, it's real hope that there's meaning and purpose behind this suffering. It still is a non-defined. It's very genericized in the sense that could look 1,000 ways on the backside of this, and one could even argue that let's say somebody's on their deathbed, and you're saying, hey, there's meaning and purpose behind it, but there's mystery as to what it is. And so how do you wrestle with the mystery as what that meaning and purpose is?
Yeah.
Because I still believe it about even those worst case scenarios.
Yeah, I think and I sort of, this was kind of like a discovery that I had, is that faith has to come first. And for me it was dependence on God. And so in that dependence on him, I had no idea what it looked like for meaning and purpose in this journey. I had no idea what it looked like to have ministry in this journey.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
But I was dependent on God completely. I had as much as I could be in this human body, but I had been basically laid out. And so I think hope was that thing that got me up, that got me doing a lot more recovery, that said to my soul, my spirit, there is meaning and purpose in this journey. And
so if you were just to have dependence, let's like a faith, dependence, and love,
mm-hmm.
your ability to get out of bed to do the rehab. Like this is, we're now dissecting why this is such an important thing. This is what
I said.
Yeah.
Without faith, hope has no legs.
Yeah.
Without hope, faith falls short.
Yes. Why does faith fall short?
I wrote it.
I know. That's why I'm actually, but you were thinking something that really told you that faith falls short without hope.
Because there's an element of faith that is action based for me, that, yes, I trusted in God in this journey, in dependence on him. But if I had just stopped there, I think hope was like, hey, not only do you trust in him, and he's your refuge and strength, but he has a special purpose and plan in this also. And that's where the hope part came in.
Yeah, I think I wanted to just camp here for a second because I think there's something that might be important that you're exploring here, and the fact that you're exploring it in your journal at this point speaks to its importance, and you've separated out faith from it, in that it falls flat. I thought that was such great words that you put down there. That faith falls flat.
I put faith without hope. Faith falls short.
Falls short. Yes. Okay. So it falls short, meaning that there's something that you recognize in your human existence that requires hope.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It falls short means that
essential. Hope is essential.
Yes, it's essential. Like otherwise, it could be that we're just robots.
Yeah.
Meaning that you could trust God to push the right buttons, and you robotically, your body responds in a sense, but it's not the human experience. It's not, it fails the will, if that makes sense. Because the will says, hey, I'm going to engage the world because there is purpose to my engagement. Where I think the other could be just a response that is a response of duty.
Mm-hmm.
Not, hey, I want to pursue, because without the will, you can't love in a real sense, right? And so there's, I want to show affection. I want to engage relationship. I want to connect with others because there's meaning in connection. And hope is the piece of that provides it, where the other is just, in a sense, a form of it's a foundation on truth. But you're exploring something there that I'm kind of just thinking about, out loud as you're going through it. It's like hope provided purpose.
Yep.
But it also provided meaning to your humanness, in a sense, because you had your own desires, you had your own, and those quite likely were different than God's desires, even at this point in time. Those desires were still they were your desires, and then you had to engage God with your desires. You had to engage God with your will and your heart. And that when you engage God with your hope, your desires, your desire for purpose and meaning, that's where, it gets really, it's like we're wrestling with God now. We're in this place.
And hope has certainty to it. There's an expectation to it. So for me, it was comforting. I had this expectation that God was going to do something unique and special with this journey.
But you went generic too again.
How
because,
so?
well, it has uncertainty also. And that's why it's an interesting part of the wrestle, is because the uncertainty is you have no idea what it looks like.
Correct. Yes.
And so there's
and that is
certainty of its goodness, I think might be the way I would say it.
I think Abraham is an example here, like where he's told he's going to be the father of all nations. Sarah's going to have a child, and yet 25 years goes by.
Yes.
Right? And I just think about what that would have been like. He had an expectation that they would have a baby, that they would have this child, Sarah. But he still had to wrestle with God for those, I'm sure 10 years into it, he was like, what is going on? What is happening?
Did he lose, so when he birthed Ishmael?
Yes. Yeah.
I know we're getting into some weeds here, but I think it might be of value. It's like, did he lose faith or hope? Or how would you define that moment where he knew what God had told him, and then he said, well, God hasn't done it yet. And so maybe
I think hope
he's waiting on me to do something.
I think they knew God could do what he wanted. I think that they were in submission to God, but I think hope was, they jumped the gun. I think that it was, hope was like, hey, God's going to do this thing for you. And they're like, and
so they lost hope.
Maybe they
had
were
faith,
thinking,
but lost hope.
Maybe they were both thinking, well, maybe it's not through what we think. Let's grab Hagar, and let's get a son through her.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, those are good thoughts, but.
Well, it does define something that's really important about hope, though, and that is that we can't dictate the mystery out of it. I guess and that's what I find, is that God gave Abraham a form of truth that he could rely on, meaning a statement that he could rely on, but he didn't tell him how it was going to happen. He didn't tell him the when it was going to happen. There was mystery in the fact that it was past her childbearing years. And so he had this situation that, do I trust this, what God told me, or there's the impossibility of this in human terms.
Yeah.
Now what do I do?
Yeah.
And in one sense, I'd be like, all right, God, let's get it on here. Not. In my mind, I'm almost the opposite. It's like, okay, either you're going to be a liar or I'm going to see the miraculous. And
Right.
you get my point. It's like there's a little bit of a challenge. You're wrestling with God. He's literally wrestling with God about what's true here. And so here you are in your journal, to take it back to you. It's like you've been told that you have purpose, that this thing should have purpose, and yet the impossible has been put on. It's like, well, purpose seems to be trying to be stripped away.
Yeah.
And you're now faced with the choices. Do you birth an Ishmael and try to create false purpose now?
Right.
Because I say false purpose because whenever we try to do something apart from God, we are, it's like apart from God, you can do nothing in a real purposeful sense.
Right.
And so here you're being challenged with this thing, and you're being, it's like,
from human terms, it looked like this was it. There's, whereas hope actually challenged my situation and said, no, God's going to do something unique and special here. And you know the story because I think you went to it, but just about a year later, I was sitting on the elder board at church, and one of our elders who was in charge of the National Prayer Breakfast event locally looked at me and said, God wants you to be the speaker. And I was like, what? 600 people go to it. The speaker? And you were at that event,
yes, I
right?
was. Yeah.
So, and that was me coming out of the closet. I mean, that thing launched.
Yes.
Speaking engagements, a book.
The transparency of your journey.
Yes. The transparency of the journey.
Which was the promise that you got.
Correct.
In a big way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating that you are looking at hope in terms of what's real. I think there's a tension here. I think where we're needing to just what I see is that you've put down hopes that are real.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I just think it's important to note that false hope is not hope.
Mm-hmm.
Hope is in what is real.
Yeah, and I think for me, physical healing, that I didn't get that word. That
you didn't get that word.
No.
Right? Yeah.
I asked for it and I put it on a shelf, but
yes,
I was given I'm going to use this. I want you to be transparent. I'm going to use this.
I think there's something I do want to explore for a second, though. This is, if we use the terms, though, is it okay to hope for healing, though?
Yeah, I think that may be a little bit different.
Context.
Yes, context. Thank you.
And we're using the word hope. That's the reason why when you put a definition around the word hope, and I still think it's important to hope for healing.
Right.
Because underlying that hope is something that is in our humanity, is a hope for having desire. Part of us is having desire, God giving us desires and the ability to hope and to have hopes and wishes. I think it's such an important part of our humanity.
Right.
And so I think that's the reason why when I think about having hope there, though, it's not certainty.
Right.
In healing, it's okay to have desire.
Right.
It's okay to have a want for, inner healing, transformation, all these things. But what you were journaling, and the reason why I think this is really important for the peace side, was your hope that you're defining here was hope in real truth. Real and
promises.
So promises, while generic, they had mystery attached to them.
Right.
They were still promises.
I mean, it's like Abraham was promised a son. But he went through 25 years of...
He was put into a place of mystery.
Because he got that at 75, and didn't have it until 99. I have the hope of eternal life. It's mysterious to me because I've never died and
experienced it.
Yeah, but I know with certainty that that's going to happen. That I'm going to get that. So. It's appropriate, I think, to use the word that's one of my hopes. That's a great hope because there's expectation attached to that. There's certainty to that.
Yes. Yeah. It's as you're going through this and we're exploring your journal and the hope that you have, you took time to get to hopes that were assurances from God himself. And you found great comfort in that is what I think I hear from you, is that if you have these hopes and assurances, that is something that brought great comfort and peace to you is what I think you're writing here. But I'm exploring this with you, but I am also thinking about our audience and we're using the word hope. And I think there's as much important too about talking about having hope of, good things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the one thing you can't do is work to pure optimism or the other side, pure pessimism. Because if you work to pure optimism, you're trying to dictate that, hey, as long as I have good thoughts about this is going to happen. And you and I both know that's not always the case. If I'm pessimistic, does that mean good things can't happen? No, good things can still happen even if you're pessimistic. I think a lot of times our wills become aligned to optimism or pessimism, and it does have influence on, whether or not we take the important steps that it takes to get to healing or not. And so they can be in some sense self-fulfilling because we work from a place of optimism or pessimism. But this is sitting in the in-between and is saying, I have desires, and then I have this certainty, and then I'm going to trust in that certainty that has been given there, which is really what was giving you some level of peace, I think, in that situation, is being able to trust in that.
Yep, for sure.
It's so fascinating how important hope is to all of us, because I'm, and we're going to run out of time today, but I was just, like, what is it you hope for today?
Yeah. And just biblically, I think there is some certainty attached to that word hope.
There is, and it's something similar though. Even now, there's meaning attached to our conversations, our interactions, and if that is true, I was like, this, as just a weird way of thinking about this a little bit is, I have hope that I'm valuable. I want to be valued. I want to be able to be lovable. I want to be all those things. And so I can place hope in God telling me, you are valuable. You're my son.
Right.
You're lovable because I love you. And then I can live and walk in that hope, even though I might feel rejection from people around me, which I do, but I can live in that hope of what you're talking about. And I think that's where there's great peace, is in the ability to experience that as we take one step at a time, walking in that hope, even though I don't always feel valuable. Right. I don't always feel lovable.
Right.
I feel sometimes the opposite.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a way of thinking about what you're going through right now, is that you've taken time to connect with what God's saying about your situation, and now you're I think starting to walk in it because you're walking in that hope. And so that's why it was important to write it down.
Yeah. And it's a 3-legged stool: faith, hope, and love. So hope is really important to our
that's why you said it falls
humanity.
It falls down if that leg is not there.
Yeah.
The other two can't support you by themselves.
Yeah.
And that is something, that's worth exploring for as people think about the importance of hope, is, do you have hope? And if you don't have hope, maybe taking time to think about because I think everybody has desire.
Right.
And then that desire hopefully can fit into real hope, meaning that it's not just false hopes, but it's hope that is been spoken over you. And it may feel generic because it's the promise isn't always, life doesn't have the mystery taken out of it. So it didn't have it for Abraham, it didn't happen for you.
Right.
You got to experience it. We've got a great thing about this story of your story is we've got to experience seeing the promise and the mystery being a bit solved or revealed as you've gone along, because you shared your Danbury story there of sharing at the prayer breakfast. And
I think the journey, faith, hope, and love, let me just for a second just say that, yes, was my faith challenged? Absolutely. Did I rest, put both feet in the camp of God doing a work here? Yes. My refuge, my strength, all that. And hope, did I believe with certainty that he was going to do something special and unique? I didn't know what that looked like, but I believed he was going to do that. And then love. I mean, as I look back on my experience, one of the most meaningful verses was that nothing can separate me from God's love in Christ Jesus, neither death nor life, height nor depth, those verses. So I understand the greatest of these is love. I think God's love for me was like the overwhelming, overarching point. I'm not sure what word to use there, but and then I think hope came out of faith first, then hope, and then the overarching God's love was just being poured out in the entire journey.
I think that's important to hear, how that fits together, and I like that a lot. I'm curious about one other thing though, while we're on this point here is, because I'm just thinking about this is inside of a month, and your initial feelings were feelings of hopelessness.
Yeah.
Feelings of hopelessness. When did your feelings catch up? In other words, when did your feelings, because one was you made statements about hope and connection. How did your feelings catch up to the reality of hope? Let's put it that way.
I think one of the aspects of my journey in the hospital was that I had a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I was working a job or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of time to reflect. I mean, I had a lot of time by myself. I had a lot of time with the Lord. And, I think at some point after I'd processed my emotions, written them down and processed and allowed myself to feel and then apply God's truth to those emotions, to what was going on inside of me. And then to sort of turn and say, hey, what about this Christian walk with this whole thing? And in that context came, what about hope? I think I know what love is and faith, but I don't know anything about hope. And for some reason, I wanted to take a little bit of a journey into the understanding of what hope is in context of what I was going through. So I'm not exactly sure when. I forget your question exactly.
Well, I was asking about when your feelings come up, because I think a lot of times we think about hope as a feeling.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it is too. Like I think it has feelings attached. I feel either hopeful or hopeless is something that we would talk about, at least in the way we use the English context for this word. And so, but we've also defined hope as something that is somewhat of our connected with our will and our inside of our inner person. And I'm actually saying, hey, I think you described it. I think your answer was, well, I processed, and as I wrote down and understood, and I think what I hear you saying is that you eventually applied your trust and your hope after processing, after reconciling all the pieces but your initial feelings were the sky has fallen and it's black. I can't even see the sun.
I think,
then eventually you're now, as you're doing this processing, you're catching up to reality. The sky is, there's a lot of dark clouds on the horizon, but it's not completely black. And then you're able to point to hope that's been revealed to you. And it gives you probably feelings of hope to be able to point to real hope.
Yeah.
The real hope is there's a purpose here. I have purpose, meaning I still have a loving God. I still have faith and trust because no matter what happens here, I can trust him. And he told me I have a future and purpose. And and now from what I think I hear in you writing, it's like your feelings are catching up to the reality of hope.
Yeah. I wonder how Abraham felt at year 17, year 18.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. And I'm sure he had lots of days where he struggled with hope.
Seems hopeless at times. I think he felt hopeless. That's why he started instituting his own.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I'm putting, there's a difference between the real hope never went away.
Right.
God's promise to him never went away.
Right.
His hope for what his future was always there, the same. But his feelings of hope, I think, were deeply impacted based upon his actions.
Right.
I need to take this into my hands because my feelings of hope are causing me to act. And I think we do act on our feelings of hope or hopelessness. Is my point about optimism versus pessimism. We act on our feelings of this. And what I think you've defined here in your journal is what real hope looks like. And then there's an importance to reconcile your feelings to that. That's kind of where I was really looking at here. It's the reason why I asked the question. It's like, hey, where are your feelings at in relationship to what you've defined as real hope?
Yeah.
And I think you decided, hey, it was kind of all being worked at the same time there. But it
was in concert.
But the process of doing this is what got you to knowing real hope. Yeah. And then having your feelings be able to align with that.
Yeah, I think for me, it was more of an underlying conviction. I'll state it like that. I didn't know what it would look like after I got out of the hospital and doing my stuff as far as what ministry looked like at all. But I knew something was going to happen. I didn't know what. In fact, I had told the Lord, I'll say yes to whatever you ask me in context of this. And when I was asked to speak, I was fearful because I'm like, I don't speak in front of people like this. And I want to be transparent.
I keep defining what you're talking about, though, as mystery.
Yeah,
I think it's okay to have hope and certainty and mystery.
Yep.
Our human experience is, I think, God lays out there are things that he's telling us about the future that we can trust in and have hope in. So we can have faith and hope, but he doesn't give it to us in perfect, 3D, 4K or 8K. We actually step into a really blurry something and it becomes clearer one day at a time. So I know we're way over time here because I just have a sense that, but I think this is great for us just to really understand the importance of hope in this
Jack's
context.
Telling us we're way over.
Nodding. Producer Jack is nodding at us. So we'll call it a wrap for today. But thanks for sharing your journey into hope and your understanding. Because I think you've got a lot to offer for us to think about in hope. In this in your journal and in this episode. So appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. Blessings.
Blessings.